Unchained is back and with a vengeance, and with it locking down the most recent YCS and taking first place, it is time to go over how to beat Unchained. Now, what is it that Unchained does? Unchained essentially uses their main monster cards to pop their other cards in their hand or on the board to special summon those monsters from the hand. And then, once those other cards are destroyed, they will actually activate their own effects to special summon more Unchained monsters from the deck. And then they can actually link into boss monsters that steal monsters off their opponent's board to link climb into higher boss monsters. So essentially, they'll use their miniature monsters to destroy other cards to special summon multiple monsters to the board to link climb off of your board into high link monsters. Honestly, it's a pretty sick deck. But on top of that, they actually have easy access into Zeus with the DDD contract package, and that is another aspect of the deck you're going to have to pay attention to when facing against the Unchained matchup. So, what is it we can use against the Unchained to beat them? Well, if you're going first, there's quite a few options you can actually use to try to lock them out of the game altogether. And the first card on today's list is Gravekeeper's Inscription. Now, if you've been following the channel for some time, you'll know we've been screaming about Gravekeeper's Inscription from the rooftops. And it is because it is amazing against graveyard decks such as Unchained. And one of the abilities Inscription has states that neither player can activate card effects in the graveyard. And since Unchained utilizes their graveyard effects, Gravekeeper's Inscription is an insane card against the Unchained matchup. So definitely be considering it against them when you're using their side deck. Next up on the list is There Can Be Only One. And honestly, this is no surprise considering that the Unchained matchup is full of Fiend monsters and actually lock themselves into the Fiend type utilizing the Unchained ability. So if you're able to use There Can Be Only One early on in the matchup and lock them into the single Fiend monster, they're not going to be able to go into their boss monsters. No links, no exceeds, and as long as you're able to keep them from going into the Sola Shiyama, you're good to go. After that is Deck Lockdown, and what better way to beat the Unchained matchup than to put them under Lock and Chain. And Deck Lockdown is an insane card against the Unchained matchup, and honestly against quite a few matchups going into this format such as Pearly. So it's kind of a 2-for-1, and now it's extremely good against Unchained because not only do they add cards from the deck to the hand constantly, but all their cards special summon monsters from the deck when destroyed. So Deck Lockdown is extremely important going against the Unchained matchup. Then, since we are actually seeing it, the Unchained matchup utilize their Banish Zone effects as well as their graveyard effects, cards such as Soul Drain are actually very useful against the Unchained matchup. So since you're paying that 1,000 life points, you are then going to be cutting them out of their graveyard effects, out of their banish effects, which they actually can utilize with some of their Unchained abilities, and that is why Soul Drain is definitely a card to be considering going into this matchup. And then following suit with the Soul Drain is cards such as Necro Valley. Maybe you're playing the up-and-coming Magic Spectre deck and you can actually utilize Necro Valley with ease of use. It is definitely something to be considering against the Unchained matchup. Just kind of keeping them out of their graveyard altogether is definitely something you want to be doing. But even though all these cards are extremely good against the Unchained matchup, it is important to note that the Unchained Sola Shiyama can pop your continuous card. So if they're able to bring out the blue dog to the board, you're going to need more than just a single floodgate to lock down the Unchained deck, okay? Do keep that in mind. And then, since they have access to triple tactics thrust and do utilize it, they will have easy access to cards such as Harpy's Feather Duster. So it's important to note a one-off floodgate might not be all you need against the Unchained matchup, even though a lot of these cards are extremely good against the deck. After that, we have cards such as Silent Graveyard, where if you discard a card, you essentially cut out your opponent's graveyard effects for a full turn. We also have cards such as Abyss Dweller, which if you're able to go into the rank 4s, this card is extremely good against the Unchained matchup, kind of like a Gravekeeper's Inscription. We even have simple staples right now that we're actually seeing it in a lot of the meta deck mains, such as Book of Eclipse, just putting in heavy work here. Not only can you interrupt your opponent's combo lines, keep them from going into the extra deck monsters, but if they already have links on the board, you can rid them from the board with things such as the destructive Karma Cannon. So these cards are good going first, as well as decent if you do draw into them going second against the Unchained matchup, and that is something to be keeping in mind. Other cards that we've actually been seeing popularity are cards such as the Cosmic Cyclone to banish their trap cards before they can destroy them, thus keeping them from summoning monsters from the hand or summoning monsters from the deck. So Cosmic Cyclone, again, kind of putting in that 2-for-1 work in the side deck. And then if you're a trap deck such as Labyrinth, not only is the Daruma Karma Cannon good like we just mentioned, but cards such as Ice Dragon's Prison actually put in a lot of work in this matchup. Not only can you steal the Link Lord Oyama from their graveyard and then banish it as well as one of their fiend monsters on their board, you can use this card to start ridding their graveyard and field of a bunch of resources that will later on keep them from playing into the future. Now, these are all amazing cards going first against the Unchained matchup. But what happens if they go first against you? Well, we have quite the list of hand traps that are very useful against the Unchained matchup. And not only that, we're going to be talking about where to be using these hand traps at, because that's very important. And first off, on the hand trap list is Ash Blossom and Joy Springs. And that's because a lot of the extenders in the Unchained matchup, as well as all their starters, do summon from the deck. So whether it's Tour Guide from the Underworld, or they're using their Aruha to pop one of their traps that will then special summon from the deck, Ash Blossom is insane against that matchup because you're able to prevent them from summoning from the deck. If you Ash Blossom the Tour Guide, that's amazing. If you Ash Blossom the trap summon, that's amazing. And why Ash Blossom is extremely good in these cases compared to Veiler or Impermanence, they can actually chain other Unchained cards from the hand to destroy cards such as Tour Guide, where then the Veiler and the Impermanence will not be negating the effect, so there will still be summoning cards from the deck. And that is why Ash Blossom is extremely good against the effects of the Tour Guide. Now, Ash Blossom is not the end-all be-all in this matchup because Impermanence and Veiler do have a reason for being in this deck, and that's because the Unchained can actually chain block out of an Ash Blossom play, and that is because when they link with the Unchained Solar Sharvara into the Yama, they can actually chain block where you're unable to Ash Blossom the search from the deck. And that is why things such as Impotent Impermanence or the Effect Failure will actually still be used in that matchup. And then on top of that, Impermanence is extremely good against the matchup because once they summon their links out to the board and start attempting to link off of your board during your turn, you can actually start your play with the Impotent Impermanence, negate their link monster, and then proceed with your turn without having to worry about them stealing monsters from your board. So Infinite Impermanence, amazing going against the Unchained matchup as well as Ash Blossom, but if your deck can utilize an Effect Failure or needs to, it is still a good card going second against that matchup. After that, since they utilize the graveyard a lot, we see Dimension Shifter just putting in a ton of work against the Unchained matchup. This is actually a card that they could actually play in their former versions, but now since they actually utilize the graveyard with a bunch of the new support, Shifter does put in tons of work. And so does DD Crow. But again, DD Crow can hit some of those nice targets, maybe hits the big dogs out of the graveyard, but again, if you're able to utilize Shifter, you're going to get a lot more bang for your buck overall. Now, since the Unchained matchup does summon a bunch of monsters before they go into their boss monsters, they have quite the starters. Nibiru the Primal Being is a card that can definitely be utilized against the Unchained matchup, just completely ridding their board of monsters, and you're not going to trigger their destruction effects because you're tributing them. Now, keep in mind, once they bring out the DDD King High Caesar, it will be able to negate the Nibiru, so do keep that in mind to try to get the Nibiru off onto the board before the King Caesar is active. Okay, and then another kind of interesting card we've been seeing putting in work is Bistio Druid Worm, and since the Magna Hut is getting hit, we've actually seen players already going for the Druid Worm action over the Magna Hut because the spot removal that it offers is incredible. Not only can you kind of banish the Lord Oyama from their graveyard as the dark target, but once it is removed from your board, you can then banish another respective resource off of their board such as cards such as the King High Caesar. So that is why Drew's Form is seeing a lot of play and a ton of side decks. The last hand trap we want to cover here today is Fantastical Dragon Phantasme, and that is because the Unchained deck does utilize a lot of links. So Phantasme will get you a bunch of draws, some of that, hand refresh that we really like, but on top of that, their links do target to link off into their higher links using your monsters. So Phantasme will actually serve as a little bit of protection as well against these link monsters that they have. And then if they're unable to go into their higher links with them, the Phantasme will actually not have a problem punching over their link monsters. So Phantasme definitely going to be putting in a lot of work at this format, and then in future formats when we see that SP Knight get dropped in the future sets. Now, what are some other cards that you can utilize going second against the Unchained matchup? And honestly, the best card of the format, and I really do stand by that, is Triple Tactics Thrust. And we're actually seeing Thrust just put in work time and time and time again. And I know it's the money card of the format. It's kind of like the droplets of the format, but honestly, this card just searches you what you need. So rather that's your prosperity to start your turn off, rather you're searching into Triple Tactics Talents, which is also another card that's just insanely good against the Unchained matchup. Thrust is putting in work. It's just going to be searching you the outs that you need. Okay, and that being said, let's go into some of these outs that we're talking about. Again, Triple Tactics Talents, just insane. They're going to be using a bunch of their quick effects during your turn. They even have links that link off your board during your main phase. So Talents, just amazing card. Maybe you can steal their monsters, maybe you can generate resources or hit out of their hand. Just again, time and time again, we're seeing this card just put in work. Other kind of neat cards we've been seeing that are also searchable off the Thrust are Change of Heart as well as Mind Control. And I would like to note, all these cards are insane against the Unchained Mare match, okay? You Change of Heart their monster, you can link climb with it. Maybe you steal their link monster that can use another one of their monsters. Maybe you take their Exceeds, go into Zeus. You take their 6, go into High Caesar. Change of Heart and Mind Control have been putting in work in this Mare match, and honestly it is extremely refreshing seeing these oldies but goodies coming back for some limelight. Last on this list of cards to be utilizing against the Unchained matchup is Marionette Might. And honestly, in the Mare match, this is a card you definitely want to utilize. Much like Mind Control, much like Change of Heart, you can basically just pitch it, take one of their monsters, and then you can do whatever you want with it. Okay, just take one of their resources and then go into one of your boss monsters with it. Marionette Might, just putting in that work all together. And guys, that is how you beat Unchained. Now, if there are any cards you are utilizing to beat the Unchained matchup, please do comment down below, because we want to be getting information to the players and let them know how to beat these meta decks. And on top of that, if there's a deck you would like to see us beat, like Branded, then definitely comment that down below. We'll try to get some information out to the players on how to beat the meta decks that they want. If you got anything from these videos at all, please do drop that sub. We really do appreciate for those who have. But as always, guys, we're gonna have more videos popping up above me and some to the side as well. But most importantly, stay safe, have a good night, and suck it, nerds.